Hey, welcome back to the Fire Break. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, where we're trying to build new techniques and technologies for mitigating the worst effects of wildfire. Wildfires aren't all bad, it's just when they burn up houses and hurt people and whatnot. That's where we have a problem. There's a lot of research being done, however, to work on this problem and figure out how are we going to live with fire. And a lot of that research is coming out of Fort Collins, Colorado, where there is a university up there. And one of the people up there working on this is Alex Heeren. Alex, welcome to the Fire Break. How are you?
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good. What are you working on up there these days?
Fort Collins or my research, my
All the above, whatever you want.
structure defensibility.
I think your research is fascinating. Why don't we start with that?
Okay, yeah, the research is I did that out of the University of Utah.
Okay.
Or that was
We
my
like Utah too. No worries.
yeah. So that research was looking at structure defensibility from a more or less from a wildland firefighter's perspective in a wildland fire context.
So there's a big fire. Buildings are threatened.
Yep.
Firefighters would like to do something about it. And what did you figure out?
Yeah, so when there's a large incident, usually with incident management teams, when multiple, like many communities or one community are threatened by wildfire, the firefighters will go into that community and basically assess each structure to whether it's defensible or non-defensible. But there's like 4 categories, but I think just to keep it simple, we'll just say defensible, non-defensible. And so that way they can go into a community and not just focus on one house, they can focus on multiple houses. So it kind of helps them like spread their workload a little bit easier. So if there's just one house that, let's say, wasn't maintaining some good defensible space, but the house next door was had done some work, and it was going to take less effort for the firefighters to mitigate some of those hazards, they'll most likely skip the house that needs more work, and they'll try and put more effort into the house that needs less work. So that way they can focus their efforts and try and like save as many houses as they can versus just focusing on one house that would take more time. And so
when you did this research, were you studying what they are doing, or were you studying things that could help impact what they do?
I was more just looking at the data. So I'm a GIS with the National Interagency Fire Center with NIFC or NWCG actually. And so we basically have the data collection system to give the firefighters, and they can assess each structure. And then within that form, they have certain variables that they can fill out. And that could be like how easy access they can have to the structure or to the property, what kind of siding it has, what kind of roofing it has, how much defensible space it has. So there's a bunch of these variables. And so my research was basically wondering, can we predict structure defensibility using these variables that they filled out? And so I ended up with, 15,000 records that were usable that I could try and run my analysis with. Yeah. And so that's what we did. We did that. But to kind of incorporate more, I ended up using some landscape variables such as like slope, vegetation characteristics, road densities for access, and then distance to roads, just to kind of beef up the analysis a little bit to see what kind of variables are actually important to firefighters, or at least what they're maybe looking at a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay, so you had access to the road, vegetation type.
Mm-hmm.
Vegetation moisture part of it?
No, that didn't get into it. Yeah. There was no fire. There's no fire behavior, no fire weather, no weather. Yeah, these are just more static kind of.
Okay,
variables.
Yeah. The non-dynamic factors that you could determine in advance,
yeah,
and that would still be the same when the fire got there.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, maybe they moved the playscape from the house a little bit, but right,
yeah. And then like quite a bit of WUI communities end up in these kind of more higher slope areas potentially. So I was also just more trying to think of like, since firefighters are looking at these structures, they're not just looking at these structures, they're also looking at fire behavior, fire weather, and then also topographic like variables, and then also like the vegetation around the houses, around the communities. So I wanted to capture that within my study as well. So that's why I went outside of just the variables that were within that form.
I see. So individuals are given lots of information, right, on how to best maintain the characteristics around their home, right?
Mhm.
Clear that 0 to 5 foot range. Try not to have trees within 30 feet, and clean your gutters and put some ember guards up, things like that. But it sounds like your research extended back out to the community as a whole and its surrounding vegetation. What did you learn in that regard?
So what we ended up finding out was firefighter safety ended up being the number one most important variable, especially distinguishing whether structures were defensible or non-defensible. This kind of doesn't really fit into any WUI strategy. This is just more firefighters taking their safety into consideration going into a WUI. So that ended up being the most important. And then the next few variables that ended up being most important were landscape characteristics. So things outside of the structure, things outside of the community, say it's 6,000 or 6 kilometers away. So we had like vegetation cover and then road densities also at 6 kilometers or 3.6 kilometers, and then slope and then structure density. So my so this analysis actually ended up showing landscape characteristics being more important than actual like defensible space by itself. But again,
Okay,
this is from a wildland firefighter's perspective.
right. So if your house is on a hill and you're over here and the fire's coming up the hill, that's 99% of your problem, versus whether you trimmed your trees that year or not.
Potentially, yeah,
I mean, the fire's coming at you.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah.
So what were the landscape features that ended up weighing in more heavily than the homeowner landscaping factors?
Yeah, it's a vegetation cover, like shrub cover, like 6 kilometers. There's road density at 3.6 kilometers, and then distance to major roads. So depending on how far away you are from a major road, so that's a like highway, that's a highway or interstate. I think I may have added county roads into that as well. And
And
then slope is
what was the impact of how close you were to a highway? Like, was that
oh,
in terms of like how fast you could get big fire trucks up there, or
uh, no, it was just like the actual distance, so how far a structure was from a major highway. But
okay?
the idea would be since it's a major road, you're most likely gonna have easier access for larger wildland fire
Oh, I
equipment to
see.
go
So
to
the
those places.
arteries are bigger, closer to
Yeah,
the highway, and
yeah.
then they get down into the little capillaries. So
Instead of having, a single dirt road that has vegetation hanging over it going up to one structure, like that's going to be a lot more dangerous for a firefighter to go up there, especially with a larger piece of equipment, because if they can't turn it around, they could potentially be entrapped. So yeah. But the distance from a major road, it ended up being the closer you are. So about at 100 or about at 1,000 meters away, it was more likely to be defensible than it was defensible. So I can show you a figure as well if
rephrase that
that would
for me.
help. But a structure at over 10,000, oh, sorry, a structure over 10,000, yeah, or structure over 10,000 meters is going to be more likely to be non-defensible than it is defensible. So yeah, from a major road. So the farther you are
Over
getting,
10,000
yeah, so the
meters, you mean
farther
from
you're
the
getting
highway?
away, the more likely it is to be or
I
more
see.
likely it
Okay.
is to be non-defensible. So the closer you are, the more likely it is to be defensible. Yeah.
I see. Okay. And one of the
No,
big
it's
aspects
just
of the
access to.
defensibility wasn't necessarily anything related to the structure, but how safe or unsafe a condition
Yeah, I think so.
would
Yeah,
attempting to fight that fire create for the firefighters. Right. So they might say, look, your house is perfectly defensible, but if we go up
exactly.
that
Yeah,
single lane dirt road to get to it, that's going to put us at risk.
yeah.
So
I
congratulations
talked
on the
to a few
mitigation work that you did
firefighters
around your house.
who
I
have
hope it
done the
works because
structure triage
that's all you
work
got.
and like on
We're
incidents,
not going up
and they
that road.
definitely have told me that before as well. That structures up a single lane
Okay.
road a mile away from a major road, just a single structure, it's just too dangerous and just not worth putting anybody else at risk to go save that one structure when there's a whole community below that structure that more work can be done.
I see. And is it likely that that single remote structure might actually be in less danger because that homeowner, if they want, they could trim 100, 200 feet
Yeah, yeah, they
away,
could. Yeah, that very well
whereas
could
the
be. I
people
mean,
in
it
that
really
densely packed
depends
community,
on the
for all the
person,
mitigation they do, they
the
can't
property
remove the
owner.
house next to them that's going to actually be the house
Yeah,
that lights their
exactly.
house on
Yeah,
fire.
yeah,
Right, what they did.
yeah, yeah,
Right,
exactly.
whether they built right
Yeah,
up against the forest or whether they put themselves in the middle of a well-mowed meadow,
yeah.
with goats to
However it
keep it
works.
down
Yeah.
below 4 inches, and right, and a sprinkler system tied into the lake that runs on an independent solar system.
Um, it's on
Yeah, however they want to do it.
MDPI
Very
Fire
interesting. And
Journal.
tell me if folks would like to read your
I was
publication,
hoping that you would maybe put a
where
link
can
up
they find it?
somewhere for people to have that access. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's titled "Modeling Factors Associated with Wildfire
Yeah,
Fire
we
Assessments of
will put a
Structure
link.
Defensibility."
Yeah,
Very scientific title.
we'll put a link on our website to it. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, Alex, I'm guessing
No
that
royalties.
having authored that report and done the research, that's probably not sufficient for your, for
Forest
your
Restoration
career to sit
Institute,
back and let the royalties roll in
CFRI.
now,
And
while you
so I'm really new to
bask
this
in the sun.
position,
Right?
so I'm still
You're
learning
on to
about
the
kind of like
next
where I'm going to fit in. But
project.
I'm going to
What are you
continue
working on
doing
right now?
like geospatial and wildfire kind of work. Um, yeah. So right now, I've just been doing. Right now, we're looking at. Sorry, I have like a tickle in my throat. Ugh. Yes, right now we're working on some pods, which are potential operational delineations. And so this is kind of a cool network. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So these are, this is like a concept that firefighters have been using for a really long time, where if a fire starts here, kind of local knowledge will know like there's a
Potential
road up here. So
operational
that's a potentially good holding
delineations.
feature
So, just
under
back
these
up for
weather
a minute and tell me
conditions
what
and
that is.
any other factors that they might want to consider. And so, but they just have this local knowledge that this road's a good feature for holding. But if an incident management team shows up, they don't have that local knowledge. They're most likely not from that area. So they don't know about that road. So they have to pull up a map and then figure out all these roads and all these holding features kind of just based off a map. So what these pods are, I mean, there's a lot of usage for these pods, but some of what these pods are good for is it's just so that we can have a bunch of people in the room get their local knowledge and then draw these pods, these lines on a map for anybody to use. So if yeah, so we can get the local knowledge and then like just set, like show that information to other people. So if if an incident management team does show up, they have these pods and they can look at them more quickly than trying to figure out, like spend a day trying to figure this stuff
Right.
out. They can
Okay.
have it like pretty instantaneous. So this has been an effort for quite a few years now. I think 100 forests have been using it now, and this is something where they're continually being updated. So like if somebody has a fire and then there's a new dozer line put through and that's a
Okay.
good holding feature and they want to continue to use that as a holding feature, they can put that into their pod network and then show that as like a new feature within the pod. So these things are continually growing. But yeah.
Okay. So you're essentially amassing this online, hopefully accessible database where you're taking the regional knowledge or the hyper local knowledge
Yeah,
and putting
exactly.
that
Yeah.
into a format where it could be accessed by
Yep.
an incident command team coming in from elsewhere that doesn't know this. And it's not relying on, you know, if Chief Johnson doesn't show up with his local knowledge, then nobody's going to know about that road up there.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But so we pre-populate,
Yeah.
right? Just, you know,
And then
or
another kind of nice thing
if I
about these
call
pods is
911 because there's a problem at my neighbor's house,
that they can
before
be
they
used
send
for
the
like
police
kind
car,
of
they're like, oh, you
different
know, they
things
own
other than
guns and
like
they've had
fire
4
suppression. So
previous
we've
calls
been
for
kind of
domestic disturbances.
looking at these,
Hey,
trying
nice to
to,
know that going in, right?
instead of just
So
looking at a 1,000,000 acre
it's kind of
landscape,
creating that database for
which just
firefighters.
seems really cumbersome. All these pods break them up into like a few thousand acres. So then you can start looking at these pods and then looking at them being like, this pod has beneficial to be burned. There's, low values at risk
Yeah.
inside of it. It has good ecological benefits to have a burn in this pod. But the pod to the north of it has a bunch of values at risk. So this pod, if we burn this pod with the values at risk is we don't really want much fire in there. So if we burn this pod, it'll benefit from keeping fire outside of this pod. So there's a bunch of new stuff that we're trying to like push toward versus negatives of other pods burning. And that can give a lot of information for people to make better decisions as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What do you mean?
Okay. So right
Oh,
now you're just trying to figure out, where you fit in the
oh, and
organization and
that's already
how your
I already
research
feel pretty at home.
aptitudes and
Everyone's been super
skills and
nice.
preferences,
It's been really nice.
best serve the organization that you're in. Well, that's good. What's your time frame for feeling comfortable there? Yeah.
No,
How
no,
long do
not
you
at
think
all.
it'll take
No,
before,
this was kind of like a
you
new
feel
thing. I'd
at home?
say just maybe a little over a year ago when I actually started finishing up my research
That's
and
good.
then writing my thesis. That's when I kind of got excited
Good.
about
How did you
research
end up
and
in this
then
career?
thought
I mean,
I
when
could
when
maybe
you
go
were
in
6, did
academia.
you know one day I'm
And
going to be
then
writing
one of my
papers
committee
about how to
members
make
works with
firefighters
CFRI
safer?
quite frequently, and he actually, there was a job opening here, so he passed me along the job announcement. I read it, and that was the first job I had seen that I actually got excited about. So that's why, yeah. I worked for the Forest Service for about 5 years, and I worked for the Park Service for about 5 or 6 years, kind of doing some botany kind of stuff, seasonal work. Yeah, and then I kind of got into what? Sorry. Yeah, then I kind of started doing some GIS
Wow.
stuff
What kind of jobs have
for
you held in
wildland
the
fire,
past?
and I just really like doing GIS. So I left the government and got my undergrad in GIS, or doing well in geography, but focusing on GIS, and then I got into my master's program
Yeah.
in another geography
So
department. So I just kind of continued doing the geospatial stuff.
go
But I
ahead.
always kind of had a foot in the door with fire. Yeah. I would say probably the thing that it pushes me the most towards doing geospatial wildland stuff
Yes.
is because I've
Yeah,
been
tell me
a
about
GISS for almost 10
how
years.
your previous
So I've been on, I don't know,
interactions with
30,
the wilderness
35
in
type
your
1
past two
incidents.
jobs
Um,
informed the
yeah,
way
so
you
seeing a lot of
feel
how
about
the
the work that you're
IMTs
doing
work
now.
and then just being on those fires, I just feel like kind of really connected to contributing to helping firefighters and decision makers make better decisions. And I can use my geospatial abilities to like help them do that. So yeah, I feel strong towards that.
Wow.
Yeah,
And I guess it
yeah,
really,
yeah.
there's a sense that your work is magnified now because, if you're humping line up a mountain, you're putting out that one fire, saving that one structure,
Oh,
but the work
that's a
that
loaded.
you're doing now, you're helping every fire.
Yeah,
You're providing a data
I've
background that,
I've
can
seen
save
some
thousands of homes over the
papers
course
coming out kind
of its
of
application
pointing
or
towards a
more.
plateau,
Unfortunately, more because,
but
right, we're going to be
the
seeing a
acreage
lot
is
more
still
fire.
really high,
What do you see as
but
the
it's
trend
not
in
continuing.
fire
The
now?
trend
More,
doesn't seem to be
less,
continuing, but I
more
can't say
severe,
that
less
like
severe?
definitively. But
I mean, I can tell you
it's
what
still
most
the
people
acres are
think,
still really
but I want to
high.
know what you think.
But yeah, I yeah yeah. Oh, my my knowledge is just for the U.S. Yeah, yeah, not internationally, but I I know internationally there's a lot of fire. That's
And
for sure.
internationally, I know in the UN's latest report, they
Yeah.
said they expect to see incidents and acreage of wildfires increasing by 30% by 2050. Is that consistent with that report, or is that overestimating it based on what you're thinking
Yeah,
for the
yeah, I
U.S.?
don't see
Okay,
why not. I might not be the best person to speak to that, but these pod networks I feel like could be very beneficial for anybody, for any
yeah.
country.
And what
Yeah.
about your pods and data and GIS? Is that all being applied locally? I
There's
know you're
all
developing it
kinds. We
locally,
use
but
R,
are
we
you
use
developing
Python,
things that could
use a
be
lot of
uh,
our
applied
GIS,
internationally that
Esri
other
products.
countries could be looking at
Yeah,
the way you put your research together and
yeah,
doing similar things?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, as a GISS, that's all we use. And I saw that you interviewed a Esri person. Yeah,
Right. And what are the types
yeah,
of software that you use to do that?
yeah.
Okay. Esri's pretty big in the space, aren't they?
Uh, oh, I mean, it's good. I mean,
Yeah, we talked
it's
to
a tool
Anthony
that I
Schultz
use,
from
but
Esri. He's
if it
their
doesn't have the
wildfire guy.
functionality that I want or need, and I just switch to R or Python. But
So, what is it
yeah,
like to work
I
with
kind of
those
just use
products?
whatever I
It
need
sounds like you're
to
having to
get my
interface
end
between,
result.
Esri products and other data and other
Yeah,
programs.
yeah, yeah,
How, to use a fire word,
yeah.
how's the
Yeah.
interoperability between the software platforms?
Oh, so this research, um, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a
good,
lot of resources.
resourceful.
I might slim it down a
Get
little
it
bit. I
done no
don't
matter
have that
what,
big
right? You'll
picture,
figure out a way.
but
That's
at least for this,
Yeah. Where do you see this research and your role in it
so
10 years out?
So for the structure defensibility paper,
Let's say
I'm going to try
you're
and push that
promoted
to be
to the
geospatial.
position where you
So
can
to
just
kind of
research
make
anything you want.
more or less
You
like
have
a
all the
risk
research
map.
assistance available to you.
Are you familiar with like
where
a
would
heat
your
map,
passion
something
drive
like
you?
that, with like communities that are higher risk or lower risk based on the variables that I found here? So I'd like to make it like a spatial map, so you can overlay it on a map of the U.S. and then kind of get a better idea
Okay,
of
well then let's say for this afternoon, if you
defensibility
could
from a
research
firefighter's
whatever you want,
perspective.
you know,
So that's
where
my
would your
next step
interest take you?
that I would like to take for with the structured, yeah, with the structured defensibility stuff, yeah.
Okay. Yes.
It's yeah, it would be from so Microsoft has a building footprint data set that
Oh, that'll
has
be fascinating.
mapped to some high percent of the 90s,
Right.
every
So when you
building
make
footprint
the
in the
structure
US.
defensibility heat
They might
map,
be doing it
no pun
globally, but at
intended,
least in the
um,
US. So they use like a deep learning algorithm
what
that
sources of
just to
data
identify the
are
structures
readily
themselves.
available to you on all
And
structures?
then,
Would you be able to pull that from satellite data? Is that from building code data,
yeah,
permit issues data?
that comes from the Tiger data set from the US Bureau of Census, the Census Bureau. So they map every road. I mean, it's pretty accurate for a national data set. It's quite, I'd say, pretty good for a national data set. Yeah, so that I can start building um, like road densities off of that. I can use the structure density to build or the Microsoft building footprints to build structure densities. And then
And what
land
about
fire
like you
data
talked
set
about road
has
diameters
slope
and
at
road
30 meters.
composition?
They also
Where does
have
that data come
vegetation
from?
cover for all different types of like for shrub, trees, herbaceous. Um, what else? Yeah, they have So a lot of these are
Okay.
yeah, pretty much, yeah. Yeah, so all these are free. All these data are free. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
So
the
the data's
structured
out there, and you just need
triage
to
data set is
train your
just
software to
no
comb
one's looked
through
at
it
it before. So that's why
and
this
pull
is kind of
together
like a new, interesting
the pieces to
take
make your heat
on
map.
structure defensibility instead of just the more typical, like, why did the structure burn down? We'll look at the DINS
Yeah.
report, which are, do you know what DINS are?
So that's interesting. So you're saying really,
Yeah.
all
Okay.
the data is out there. It's just that we have to have new,
Mm-hmm.
creative and useful ways to
Yeah.
put it together in order to make it useful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. 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 Haven't tied anything to whether these structures survived or not, or how much
Yeah, and
time,
realizing
mitigation
that it
time
might
these
not have
firefighters
anything
put
to
in
do with
each
the
structure.
structure, but its
I think that would
location
be a really
or its
cool aspect to this.
accessibility
I just don't
or
know
the risk that
how I would
defending that
acquire that
structure
kind of data.
posed to the fire service.
I would like to tie it in somehow. There might be a way that I
Yeah,
could do it, but
that's interesting,
for
and
now,
I think
it's just kind of just
you're
saying
really
whether it's
unique in
defensible or
looking
not
at it that way
defensible.
because everyone else is trying to look at the
Yeah,
science. Why did it burn? Well, it burned it because it's the end of a road that we don't want to go down. Ah, okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So is your
yeah. That could be
I guess
something.
your heat map, has peaks on it for right the things that
Yeah,
are least defensible are going to be the highest.
I
You
don't
know,
know
if
about
we
the
were to
pods,
visualize that as a
but maybe.
terrain map. So then
Yeah,
would it be equally
I
true
would
that
like
the
to
structures that were
maybe
least
use it more
defensible
as like
were also the ones that pose the greatest
I don't
hazard to
know. I mean, there's a
firefighters,
few
and
ways that you could
therefore
look at it. You could look at it
you
for
could
firefighter
warn
safety
them in
and decision
advance,
making.
hey,
But you could
you
also
know,
look at it
don't bother going down this cove because everything up
from a
there is on a
community's
single lane
perspective,
dirt
and they
road
could
with
potentially
overhanging
use
trees.
this information to
And you don't
add
have
a
to go up
safety
the
zone
road to see
just for
why you don't want to go
firefighters,
up it, right? That could
and then
also
also
be
look
in
at different
your
risks in that
pod's data,
community.
right?
So maybe look at their defensible space, both to help
Or
make their
in some
make their
accessible
community
database.
more defensible. I think that would be kind of nice as well. Yeah, I think so.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think I would just probably
I would
keep
imagine that
the
sitting in
number
your seat
one.
would be a very
The number one
satisfying
would be just
experience.
keep firefighters safe.
Yeah, you know, to be able to know
Number one
what's out
priority.
there data
Yeah,
wise,
number one
and then to
priority is
have
everybody
really
goes home.
original
Yeah.
ideas about how to use it, and then have someone write you a paycheck to explore this thing that you're really
Yeah,
curious
exactly.
about.
Yeah.
So kudos to you on landing where you are. Yeah, it's probably earlier in your career to ask you this question, but if you were in charge of fire for the world, you know, what directives might you give?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Live to fight another
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you know, and if not for you, for your family, right? They
Yeah, thanks for having me.
they need you, they love you, they care about you, and they want you around. And not only they not want you to die, but I think they know they don't want you to be traumatized because that can be a living death as well. In the once you push people too far into the PTSD world, uh, it's very sad. And imagine that the data that you're compiling and the results you're drawing from it are going to go a long way towards keeping firefighters out of dangerous situations. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Great. Alex, thank you so much for joining me here on the fire break. It's great speaking with you. All right, folks. Well, you heard it right here from Alex directly. There's a lot of information out there, and if we can compile it the right way, it could actually become useful and save lives and structures. So good news here on the front coming out of Fort Collins. You've been listening or watching The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. Take care, and we'll see you next time.